In a time when the whispers of legend mingled with the breath of the gods, a most splendid event was set in motion upon the ethereal heights of Mount Olympus. A wedding of epic repute was upon the realm, marking the union of Peleus, a mortal of commendable stature, and Thetis, a sea nymph of incomparable grace. As day gently descended into night, the celestial banquet unfolded in the ambrosial gardens, amidst the subtle hues of twilight and the soft rustle of spring leaves. Solar chariots graced the sky as an ensemble of deities gathered to celebrate the divine matrimony. The affair indeed promised abundance, with every god and goddess of notable grandeur in attendance. However, among the divine assembly, one presence was conspicuously absent: Eris, the goddess of discord. Uninvited for fear of her notorious propensity for chaos, Eris seethed in the shadows, contemplating her exclusion. It was then, with a stir of mischief, that she conceived her vengeance. With a flick of her wrist and an incantation over an opulent apple of gold, she inscribed the fateful words for the fairest upon its gleaming surface. In a dramatic display, she cast the apple among the congregated divinities, thus igniting the flame of rivalry that would echo through the annals of myth. Attention soon turned to the apple's siren call, drawing the eyes of Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite, each goddess renowned for her own allurement and divine authority. Confident and certain of her own beauty, Hera claimed the apple with regal certainty, her presence imbued with queenship over the heavens. Athena, wisdom embodied, perceived the apple's unspoken power and staked her claim, arguing the virtues of intellect and valor. And Aphrodite, with a smile that could bend mortal and immortal hearts alike, laid her assertion, echoing the enchanting allure she wielded over the very essence of love. Caught in the tumultuous tug-of-war, Zeus, the king of gods, chose prudence over passion by not naming one among them as the fairest. Instead, he deftly evaded the brewing storm, choosing an unlikely arbiter for this delicate decision. The task fell upon Paris, a prince of Troy known for his beauty as much as his fated legacy. Zeus believed, or perhaps hoped, that Paris's judgment, tempered by his current life as a humble shepherd away from the glamour of royal halls, would be impartial. Transported from the pastoral peace of his hillside abode, Paris found himself amidst divine presences who rivaled the stars in their splendor. One by one, the goddesses approached him with their bounteous offers, hoping to sway him with gifts that no mortal could refuse. Hera, in her commanding tone, proffered authority, promising dominion over all earthly realms, the majesty of kingly rule at Paris's feet. Athena met him next with the gift of eternal wisdom and skill in warfare, ultimately offering him the prowess of the greatest warrior among men. Aphrodite came last, with a gift as enchanting as it was potent. She promised the love of Helen of Sparta, a woman whose beauty was whispered about across distant lands as the fairest of mortals. The prospect of such love enthralled Paris, enchanting him beyond the limits of his previous imaginings. As the twilight settled its soft embrace over Olympus, Paris contemplated his decision, breathing in the essence of each goddess's allure. His choice carried the weight not just of a golden fruit, but of impending destiny. With the decisive grace born of youthful impulsiveness, Paris offered the apple to Aphrodite, his judgment intertwined with a promise that, in seeking the most wondrous love, he would invite both joy and calamity upon the mortal realm and his own city of Troy. Thus, in this moment of divine selection, a seed of discord was sown, leading to a cascade of events that would embroil gods and mortals alike in an epic saga. Paris's selection of Aphrodite set the stage for the unfolding drama that would become known as the Trojan War, a tale carved into the scrolls of history through acts of valor, pride, and the inexorable dance of fate. Paris, having been chosen to decide the dispute among the goddesses, returned to Troy with a promise that would soon ignite the flames of war. Guided by Aphrodite's vow to grant him the love of the most beautiful mortal woman, Paris ventured to Sparta under the pretense of friendship and diplomacy. The journey across the Aegean Sea was smooth, the waters calm under the sails of his adventurous spirit, and the weight of destiny subtly guiding his course. Upon his arrival in the storied land of Sparta, Paris was warmly received by King Menelaus and his renowned queen, Helen. The court glittered with regal splendor, welcoming Paris as a guest of honor. As the days unfolded with feasts and celebrations, the allure of Helen's beauty, as promised by Aphrodite, began to weave its enchantment over Paris. The goddess subtly drew their hearts together, unseen and unfelt, yet undeniably influential. This affection was not born of mere mortal whim, but of divine orchestration, setting the stage for a fateful unraveling. Shortly after Paris's arrival, Menelaus was called away to Crete, leaving Paris and Helen alone amidst the grand halls and gardens of the Spartan palace. With Menelaus absent, Paris and Helen spent their days in conversation, exploring the corridors of affection and shared laughter. Each encounter fanned the flames of their growing passion, their hearts a tapestry being woven with threads of fate and emotion. The pair soon found themselves entrapped within Aphrodite's delusive embrace, their desires reaching a crescendo that neither could deny. With plans set in secretive whispers by twilight, Paris and Helen resolved to flee Sparta together. The moon, a silent witness, cast its silvery glow upon their clandestine departure to the shores where a Trojan ship awaited. Here, under a canopy of stars twinkling like Aphrodite's subtle smile, whispers of love and resolution filled the air. The cool night enveloped them as they boarded the ship, symbolizing both departure and the crossing of irreversible thresholds. Their hearts carried silent assurances of a journey into the unknown, tethered now to the same irresistible pull of destiny that governed gods and mortals alike. They were not alone in their departure. They took with them not just the personal treasures of Sparta, but also its wealth and best-kept secrets. Laden with goods and treasures as was customary for a hopeful sojourner, Paris and Helen's departure contained echoes of the tales of yore, where golden prizes and heart's desires intertwine, setting courses uncharted and unforeseen. Their choices, like leaves caught in the divine wind, took them towards the city of Troy, where the consequences of their union would soon be felt by two great nations. The news reached Menelaus swiftly, crackling and sparking outrage within him. Upon his return from Crete, the absence of Helen and the news of Paris's departure seared him deeply. His heart awoke to a fury that would call upon ancient oaths sworn by the Greek kings, binding them in mutual defense and retribution. Agamemnon, Menelaus's brother and the powerful leader of the Greek forces, was summoned forth. Together, they saw that the ancient compact demanded fulfillment. Helen's return at any cost was a measure of pride and honor, still held aloft. And so, the drums of preparation sounded far and wide across the Greek lands. The rulers, remembering their promises to support Menelaus, should his queen ever be taken, assembled their mightiest warriors and readied their ships for departure. The call to arms was heralded across majestic hills and fertile valleys, each echoing with the purpose of a united front. This alliance of kings now set forth to retrieve Helen, to bring the spirited queen back from Troy. The waters of the Aegean, once a peaceful conduit for Paris, would soon bear witness to an assembly of the greatest heroes of the age. The love of Helen, complicit in sparking such a grand campaign, set her story on an unchangeable path, entwined with the fortunes of legendary warriors and the ambitions of nations. Paris and Helen's elopement was more than a lover's escape. It became the match lighting the pyre of an epic conflict remembered for the ages. With hearts intertwined and fates irrevocably aligned, they lay the groundwork for what was to come, a war resonant with echoes of divine will and mortal despair. Thus, the stage was set, and the pieces in motion for a conflict that would become timeless, its legends echoing through the corridors of history. As the Greeks readied their ships and massed their forces, destiny's hand rested on their collective shoulder, guiding them toward the inevitable shores of Troy. In the wake of Helen's elopement with Paris, an unsettled air pervaded Greece. Agamemnon, the resolute leader of the Greek forces, understood the gravity of the situation. Seizing the call to arms, he swiftly dispatched envoys to the distinguished kings and mighty heroes across the lands. Each envoy bore messages of the oath sworn by the Greek leaders under the walls of Sparta, a vow to unite against any who would abduct Helen. This oath, made long ago, now bound them together in a formidable alliance against the city of Troy. In cities and towns, the alarm of war resonated, summoning valorous men to partake in a venture that promised both glory and peril. Among the powerful lords called to arms was Achilles, celebrated as the mightiest of Greek warriors. His deeds were renowned, and his presence on the battlefield was considered indispensable. With promises of unmatched glory and everlasting honor, Agamemnon's envoys entreated Achilles to join their righteous endeavor. This call to destiny touched Achilles' heart, igniting his yearning for meaning beyond mortal life. With an unyielding resolve, Achilles accepted the call, his eyes fixed on vengeance and the acclaim that awaited him in the halls of the brave. Odysseus, the sagacious king of Ithaca, known for his cunning, was less inclined. Despite his cleverness and prior exploits, he wished to remain with his newly formed family. But the urgency of the cause would not be denied. Through the wit of Palamedes, a fellow Greek hero known for his ingenuity, Odysseus was cleverly drawn from his reluctance. Conceding to the call, he prepared to embark upon an odyssey, one that would mark his name in the annals of heroic deeds. Amidst the gathering forces, the seer Calchas, gifted with foresight and wisdom beyond the mortal veil, delivered grave predictions. He foresaw that divine favor was crucial, and to appease Artemis, a great sacrifice was required. Agamemnon, heavy with the duty of leadership, faced a dire decision. To the altar was led his dear daughter, Iphigenia. With tears unseen in the solemnity of kingship, Agamemnon steeled himself to make this profound sacrifice. The act, both sobering and necessary, resonated through the ranks, illustrating the severe demands of the impending struggle. Thus, the Greeks assembled at Aulis, a formidable host of ships and warriors, their numbers staggering under the rising sun. Yet despite their readiness, the winds turned against them, a reminder of the gods' capriciousness. For days, the fleet remained anchored, the warriors idle and apprehensive. In this pause, tensions simmered. Yet, a final omen whispered on the wings of the night, offered reassurance. The winds would soon favor them, signaling the divine support of their quest. So it was, as dawn broke once more upon the harbor of Aulis, that the aegis of good fortune returned. Under a determined sun, glowing in crimson and gold, the massive fleet at last departed. The hundreds of ships unfurled their sails toward an unseeable horizon, their prows cutting through the waters with purpose and unity. Each warrior knew that the journey ahead, one of strife and heroism, would etch their names into the tapestry of history. Their eyes, resolute and unyielding, turned toward Troy, a city that would stand witness to acts both noble and tragic. Thus, as the Greek fleet sailed forth, the siege of Troy was set in motion, destined to unravel over countless years. Untouched by generations, this conflict, sparked by mortal love and guided by divine hands, would unfold in ways unknown to those embarking upon it. The sea stretched vast ahead, a canvas upon which the fates of gods and men would be painted. As the ships sailed under the rising sun, a collective anticipation swept through the ranks. Their voyage, begun today, promised tales of valor that would echo through the ages. As the first rays of dawn graced the skies, the Greek fleet sailed into view of Troy, their ships cutting through the turquoise waves with determined purpose. These men, heroes of Greece, had set upon this monumental task, driven by a call for honor and bound by oaths sworn to retrieve Helen. The whispers of the wind spoke of destiny, carrying with them the weight of fateful events yet to unfold. On the beaches of Troy, the Greeks found their landing unopposed, a calm moment before the storm. Disembarking from their vessels, they established a bustling camp against the backdrop of the city's formidable walls. With the pale light growing stronger, the Greeks fortified their strategic encampment, setting up rows of tents amid the dunes. Their minds were sharp, aware of the trials that awaited just beyond the sandy shore. Patrols were organized, shields and spears gleaming in the early light as plans were laid. The defenses of Troy stood tall in the distance, a reminder of the resilient foe that lay within. It was here they would gauge the strength of their adversaries, and in doing so, measure their own courage. In the initial days of their arrival, skirmishes sparked like flickering flames in the wind. Greek warriors encountered Trojan scouts, each encounter a dance of blades and a testing of metal. These preliminary clashes served as a prelude, echoing the larger conflict that sat on the horizon like a brewing storm. Fighters on both sides defended their honor and valor, each hoping for a decisive strike. Amidst these contests, Achilles stood as a beacon of strength. His presence was felt on the battlefield, his form a whirlwind of motion and skill. Leading a successful raid on nearby villages, Achilles demonstrated not just his prowess, but his strategic acumen. Through these engagements, he etched his name deeper into the annals of heroism, striving towards the glory that lay ahead. By his side, Patroclus fought with a heart full of bravery, an unwavering companion who shared in Achilles' quest. During lulls between these bouts of combat, the Greeks took heed of their position. A tactical evaluation of Troy's defenses was undertaken, seeking weaknesses in the towering walls. The city loomed large, its walls a tapestry of history and prophecy, whispering tales that mingled with the sea breeze. Intelligence gathered from these evaluations informed plans, laying the groundwork for future assaults. The quiet periods were punctuated by the rumble of armed conflict, and soon, the Trojans attempted a counterattack. The shoreline saw another wave of clashing forces, spears singing and shields colliding in a furious melee. Yet, the Greeks, galvanized by their leader's valor, repulsed these advances with resilience, holding strong their grip upon the sandy strand. Even as the Trojans retreated back within their walls, the Greeks knew the creeping tendrils of a long siege had begun to wrap around both sides. With both armies entrenched, the beach they claimed became a new home away from their homeland. Rest and preparation filled the time between engagements, each soldier aware of the epic confrontation yet to come. Achilles, alongside the other warriors, prepared mentally and physically for the trials that lay ahead, a quiet determination guiding his every action. As the sun dipped towards the horizon, casting long shadows over the camp and the looming walls ahead, thoughts turned to destiny. The Greeks remained steadfast, driven by their mission and the pursuit of honor. They had come to a land where history would be written in both victory and loss, their actions shaping stories yet to be told. In those embers of day, the stage was set for an epic struggle, with neither side willing to yield. Beyond the immediate echoes of their skirmishes, the Greek heroes perceived the vast narrative of fate unraveling before them. An epic tale was being woven, each thread representing their courage, their resilience, and the inescapable intersection of mortal will and divine whim. The beachhead they now possessed served as their threshold, a gateway into the longest and hardest endeavor of their lives. With entrenched forces and eyes fixed on the towers of Troy, They waited, warriors on the cusp of myth, poised for the epic that fate had promised. The tranquil transition from day to night mirrored their own threshold, embracing the calm before the storm, a respite before the inevitable clash. In the tranquil aftermath of the initial skirmishes, both Greek and Trojan leaders sensed the toll of prolonged warfare weighing on their weary soldiers. With each side longing for an end to the conflict, a truce is called, a solemn pact that offers a brief respite from the ceaseless clamor of battle. Under this fragile armistice, a novel solution is proposed. A single duel, fought between champions of both sides, to settle the war once and for all. This proposition, a seemingly simple resolution to an otherwise unending conflict, ignites a spark of hope among the assembled hosts. Paris, the Trojan prince whose actions had single-handedly sparked the war, steps forward to represent Troy. His youthful confidence is shadowed by an undercurrent of apprehension, for his foe is Menelaus, the wronged husband of Helen, and a fearsome warrior in his own right. As Paris dons his armor, the silent gaze of the assembled armies rests heavily upon him, both Greeks and Trojans pondering the implications of the impending duel. Despite his initial nervousness, Paris accepts the challenge, determined to uphold his pride and the honor of Troy. With the sun climbing high in the clear sky, casting a golden light across the battlefield, the combatants meet amidst an expanse of open ground. Warriors from both sides gather to witness this monumental clash. The gathering is a tapestry of contrasting emotions, hope, uncertainty, and a tense anticipation that permeates the air. Menelaus, brandishing his bronze spear with seasoned confidence, steps forward to meet Paris, his face set in stern determination. The onlookers hold their breath as the duel begins. The clash of armor echoes across the plains as Menelaus and Paris engage in combat. Blades glint in the sunlight, and the air hums with the resonance of their deadly dance. Menelaus, hardened by experience and fueled by desire for vengeance, presses the attack. His strikes are fierce and unrelenting, pushing Paris backward, each blow ringing with the promise of retribution. Paris, though skilled and agile, begins to falter under the relentless assault. The prince who had once boldly wielded the favor of a goddess now finds himself struggling against the might of Menelaus. In a moment of apparent triumph, Menelaus gains the upper hand. Overcoming Paris with the strength of an angry tide, he raises his sword, poised to deliver the final strike that would seal the end of conflict. The futility of resistance apparent, Paris staggers as the weight of his predicament bears down on him. But at this critical juncture, divine intervention alters the course of fate. Aphrodite, the goddess of love who first instigated Paris's infatuation with Helen, intervenes to rescue her favored mortal. As Menelaus's blade descends, Paris is suddenly enveloped in a shroud of ethereal mist. The warriors, startled and awed, watch as he vanishes from the battlefield, spirited away to the sanctity of Troy by Aphrodite's unseen hand. His abrupt disappearance leaves the gathered armies in disarray, a murmur of disbelief rippling through their ranks. Yet, even as Paris finds sanctuary within Troy, Helen is swiftly returned to his side, an act orchestrated by the same divine influence that saved him from defeat. With the duel left unresolved, the fragile truce dissolves like morning mist under the sun's advance. The Greeks, incensed by what they perceive as a trick of the Trojans, find their fury rekindled, their cries for retribution echoing across the battlefield. This perceived betrayal, the denial of a clear victor, plunges both armies back into the grips of war. Hostilities are renewed with vigor, the promise of a peaceful resolution fading into the annals of what might have been. As the sun begins its descent, casting long shadows over the fields, the renewed clash between Greeks and Trojans signals an intensification of the conflict that shows no sign of abating. The duel, meant to be a harbinger of peace, instead becomes a mere chapter in the lengthy saga of strife, setting the stage for further clashes and daring exploits. For now, the war continues, its conclusion as uncertain as the flickering fireflies that herald nightfall. The tension had been building between Achilles, the bravest of the Greek heroes, and Agamemnon, the formidable leader of the Greek forces. Like a storm brewing over silent seas, their quarrel began to overshadow their quest against Troy. The dispute stemmed from the spoils of war, a matter deeply entwined with honor and pride. Agamemnon, claiming his due as the commander, demanded the return of Briseis, a captive woman whom Achilles had taken as a prize. This demand cut deep into Achilles' pride, as the girl represented not just personal affection, but also a symbol of his prowess and honor in battle. Achilles, with fury burning in his heart, made a monumental decision. His anger was such that he withdrew himself and his contingent of warriors from the battlefield. It was a choice born from wounded pride, yet it was one that would send ripples through the tide of war. Without Achilles, the anchor of Greek strength and morale, the Greeks felt the burden of his absence weigh heavily upon them. It was as if the cornerstone of their fighting spirit had been removed, leaving an unstable foundation vulnerable to the coming storm. In his solitude, Achilles turned to the sea, seeking solace in the rhythmic crash of waves against the Aegean coast. It was here that he prayed to his divine mother, Thetis, a goddess of the sea. Achilles implored her to beseech Zeus, the king of the gods, to favor the Trojans temporarily, thereby teaching the Greeks a harsh lesson about their reliance on him. Thetis, bound by the love of a mother for her child, took his plea to the lofty heights of Olympus. Zeus, in his wisdom and sometimes inscrutable designs, agreed to this shift in favor, setting in motion a temporary alteration in the fate of the conflict. As the Greeks struggled in battle without their mightiest hero, the tide turned. The Trojans, energized by the favor of the gods and emboldened by the absence of their terrifying opponent, began to gain ground. Skirmishes that once would have been mere footnotes in the saga of the war now loomed large, as what might have been key moments of Greek dominance slipped from their grasp. With each engagement, the Greeks found themselves pushed back, their morale dwindling like a candle flickering in a drafty hall. The absence of Achilles reverberated through the Greek ranks, manifesting not merely as a tactical disadvantage, but as a palpable fracture in their unity. Warriors who had drawn strength from the presence of the indomitable Achilles now faced an enemy emboldened by the cries of victory, the spark of hope ignited by the favor of divine will. It was a reminder that in such legendary conflicts, the whims of gods and the flaws of men are often intricate partners in the dance of destiny. Amid this, the gods continued their interventions, each driven by their own allegiances and ancient rivalries. As much as mortals waged their battles on earth, the deities played their part from the heights of Olympus, pushing and pulling the threads of mortal fate like players in a grand eternal tapestry. And through it all, Achilles remained apart, wrestling with the twin desires of his pride and his deep-seated need for meaning beyond the battlefield. The sea remained constant in its rhythm as Achilles contemplated his course, pondering whether his withdrawal was an assertion of self or a forsaking of duty. Yet within the camp the whispers of his absence grew louder, casting shadows over the hopes of a swift victory. The Greeks were left to grapple not only with their immediate foes, but with the intangible consequences of pride and the eternal dance of fate and free will. The stage was set for a further turning of the tide. Although the absence of Achilles had swayed fortune's wheel in Troy's favor, the gods' interference and the interwoven destinies of both men and deities promised that battle lines were far from far, definitively drawn. As one chapter closed, the next awaited with the promise of unfolding drama, the cycle of war and glory inexorably turning toward its climax. As the sun reached its zenith, Hector, the valiant prince of Troy, rallied his troops with a fervent spirit. His voice rang out across the dusty plains as he encouraged the Trojans to seize this moment of opportunity. Across the battlefield, the resolve of the Greek forces seemed to waver without their champion, Achilles, who still brooded by the shore, nursing his wounded pride. Encouraged by Hector's unwavering courage, the Trojans readied themselves for an assault that could tip the balance of the war in their favor. Under Hector's command, the Trojans launched a fierce and determined attack against the Greek fortifications. With calculated movements, Hector led battalion after battalion, like an unstoppable wave crashing over rocks, pressing relentlessly against the Greek lines. The Greeks, caught off guard by the ferocity of the assault, found themselves pushed slowly back towards their ships. Each step seemed to echo the gravity of the struggle, as the once mighty Greek battalion strained under the pressure of the Trojan onslaught. Paris, with dexterity and charm untouched by fear, fought alongside his brother Hector. His arrows flew true, striking down Greek warriors from a distance, as Hector wielded his sword with unmatched valor on the front lines. The brothers, united in their defense of Troy, ignited the spirit of their men, turning the tide of the battle. The sound of weapons clashing and warriors shouting filled the air, a symphony of conflict underscored by the cries of determination and the ever-present specter of fate's unpredictable hand. From the heights of Olympus, Zeus surveyed the battlefield with a calculating eye. True to the promise made to Thetis, mother of Achilles, he continued to tilt his scales in favor of the Trojans. The Greeks, struggling to hold their ground, felt the invisible weight of Zeus's influence pressing upon them. Yet, despite the divine intervention bolstering their foes, the Greeks fought valiantly, determined not to yield easily to the encroaching forces. The relentless assault continued, and soon the Greek defenses began to buckle under the strain of sustainment and depletion. The Trojans, emboldened by their successes, stormed the Greek fortifications, tearing through barriers that had once seemed impenetrable. As the battle raged on, the Greeks found themselves increasingly besieged, their resolve wavering under the pressure of constant attacks from the seasoned Trojan warriors. Meanwhile, an embattled Greek council convened within the center of their camp. Leaders and generals voiced their desperation, recognizing the crumbling perimeter of their defenses. United by a looming threat of defeat, they drafted a humble plea to Achilles, entreating him to return to the battlefield and aid in turning the tide. Messengers were dispatched, voices of reason and necessity imploring the proud warrior to rejoin his comrades in arms against a relentless adversary. Yet Achilles, unyielded by their entreaties, remained unmoved. Clad in silent grief and indignation, his thoughts dwelled upon the insults he had suffered at Agamemnon's hands. His heart, bound by bitterness, could not yet recognize the plight of his fellow Greeks, his inner turmoil too great a barrier to breach for their words. Thus, their appeals fell upon ears reluctant to listen, leaving the Greeks momentarily bereft of their strongest champion. Among those who could not stand by idle, Patroclus gazed upon the struggle with heavy heart. Anxious for the fate of his kin and friends, he channeled his own desperation into entreaties directed at Achilles. Moved by the suffering he witnessed, Patroclus ventured to his friend and, with earnest sincerity, implored Achilles to reconsider his stance. The loyalty and friendship between the two ran deep, and Patroclus's pleas struck at the chord of honor that Achilles so dearly cherished. Patroclus's entreaty planted the seed of reflection within Achilles' heart, stirring echoes of duty and friendship that struggled against the walls he had built. Yet as the chapter closed, the embattled Greeks fought tirelessly against a gathering storm, the aid they sought from their greatest warrior, Achilles, remaining an uncertain prospect. In the quiet between battles, decisions loomed, and the fates awaited the next move in their timeless game. In the midst of the enduring conflict between the Greeks and Trojans, the absence of Achilles weighed heavily on the Greek forces. Their spirits sagged under the relentless assaults of Hector and his Trojan warriors. In their dire state, Patroclus, a dear companion of Achilles and a warrior of valor, decided upon a bold course to inspire hope amongst his beleaguered comrades. He resolved to don the resplendent armor of Achilles, a gift from his friend and a symbol of the mightiest warrior withholding his power from the battlefield. With the familiar gleam upon him, Patroclus hoped to deceive the Trojans into thinking Achilles had returned, thus reinvigorating the weary Greeks. Achilles, initially resistant, witnessed Patroclus's determination and realized the situation's desperate nature. Begrudgingly and with a heavy heart, he granted Patroclus the use of his legendary armor, yet with a stern warning. Achilles cautioned his friend to drive the Trojans back, but not to pursue Hector into the depths of battle, as overcoming Hector required Achilles' own legendary prowess. This caveat, however, did not diminish Patroclus's resolve, whose heart burned with allegiance to Achilles and Greece. Clad in the imposing armor, Patroclus stepped onto the battlefield, his presence igniting a renewed flame within the Greeks. The sight of what seemed to be Achilles invigorated them, driving them to rally and fight with enhanced vigor against their adversaries. Patroclus, emboldened by the guise of the armor, charged at the forefront, his bravery inspiring his fellow warriors to push back the Trojan forces. Waves of Greek fighters crashed into the Trojan line with a reinvigorated spirit, emboldened by the perceived return of their greatest hero. Momentarily, the Greeks gained the upper hand, and the pressure on their ships eased. Patroclus fought valiantly against enemy after enemy, bringing glory not only to himself, but reflecting the radiance of Achilles' influence upon the battlefield. His skill in combat shone brightly, his actions heroic and driven by the noble intent of saving his fellow warriors and fulfilling what he perceived as his destiny. Yet, as the tide seemed to favor the Greeks, Patroclus ventured further into the Trojan lines, eventually coming face to face with Hector, the revered Trojan prince. A fierce encounter ensued, one that would test Patroclus of metal and the steel of Achilles' armor. Despite his valiant efforts, Patroclus was no match for Hector, whose prowess and determination were unmatched by any besides Achilles himself. Hector struck with a warrior's expertise, and with fatal finality, Patroclus fell, his blood staining the earth beneath him and marking the twilight of his temporary triumph. When the Greeks saw their mighty leader defeated, sorrow cascaded through their ranks, like a shadow passing over them. The death of Patroclus weighed heavily on their shoulders, a monumental loss amid an already daunting struggle. News of his fall spread quickly to the Greek encampment, where Achilles, the champion who had withdrawn from the fight, was burdened with the heart-rending revelation of his friend's demise. Achilles received the news with profound grief, his heart suddenly as heavy as a mountain. The loss of his beloved friend, who had embodied the vigor and spirit of the Greek forces, transformed his sorrow into an unmistakable, burning rage. The death of Patroclus shattered the shackles of his withdrawal, forging them into a fierce resolve to reclaim what had been unjustly taken from him and his people. Rising with renewed determination, Achilles vowed to avenge Patroclus, casting aside the conflict that had kept him from the battlefield. He would meet Hector, the slayer of his companion, and in doing so, honor Patroclus' sacrifice with valor. The return of Achilles to combat awaited, a new chapter in the legend that would bring with it a reckoning upon those who stood against him. As the shadows lengthened on the battlefield, and the blood-stained armor gleamed under the ashen sky, a resolute purpose gripped Achilles and the Greeks. Achilles' approaching reemergence painted a new dawn for their cause, one that promised retribution and balance in a war swathed in the turmoil of divine and human folly. The deep winter skies were painted with hues of fiery red and burnt gold as twilight descended upon the plains outside Troy's gates. In the heart of the Greek camp, there was a stirring of new hope, for Achilles, the mightiest of the warriors, had rejoined the fray. Clad in armor forged by the divine smith Hephaestus himself, Achilles' presence was a beacon of strength to the Greek forces. Each intricate etching on his shimmering shield and helm spoke of gods and legends, a testament to his reinvigorated power and the destiny that awaited him. With renewed vigor and an aura of unrelenting ferocity, Achilles led a fierce assault against the Trojan lines. The clash of weapons and cries of warriors created a symphony of determination and anger as the Greek forces, buoyed by their champion, drove the Trojans back toward their formidable city walls. Achilles was a whirlwind of destruction, cutting a path through the enemy ranks, his heart steeled by the promise of vengeance for his fallen friend, Patroclus. Amidst the chaos of battle, one figure drew his attention above all: Hector, the noble Trojan prince whose spear had felled Patroclus. The gods themselves watched from the heavens, their ethereal forms barely perceptible as they hovered, knowing well the outcome that fate had woven. The stage was set for a confrontation that would alter the course of the war, as Achilles charged directly for Hector, his eyes ablaze with the fire of wrath. Hector, standing steadfast within the ranks of his beleaguered troops, saw Achilles' approach and understood the dire weight of this impending duel. Yet, he did not flee. Despite foreseeing his fate, Hector embodied the stoic bravery and honor that befit a prince of Troy. He stood firm, clad in armor that glinted under the swift winds that swept across the battlefield, prepared to meet the fierce Greek champion in single combat. As the armies on either side momentarily held their breath, Achilles and Hector met in the center of the melee. The clash of their weapons reverberated through the plains, a dramatic symphony echoing the sad truths of war and destiny. Their duel was swift and fierce, a testament to their unmatched prowess. However, it was Achilles' fury and determination, fueled by grief, that proved unstoppable. In a tragic yet inevitable turn of events, Achilles' spear found its mark, and Hector fell, a hero in his own right, his lifeblood staining the earth. The moment was weighted with sorrow and finality, as Achilles looked upon the fallen Hector, the embodiment of both his vengeance fulfilled and the cost of rage. As grief twisted with wrath, Achilles committed a final act of desecration, binding Hector's body to his chariot and dragging it around the walls of Troy. The sight was a harsh lamentation, a victory shrouded in bitterness, witnessed by the horrified and grieving Trojan onlookers. Within the city, the wails of mourning rose. A son, a husband, a brother, and a protector was lost to Troy. Priam, the wise and aged king, bore the suffering of a father who had outlived his son. His heart, heavy with sorrow, contemplated the profound loss as he watched the desecration from the battlements. The death of Hector marked a turning point, not just for the Trojans, who grieved and rallied in the face of this tragedy, but also for the Greeks, who in Achilles' rage saw both a savior and a reminder of the war's merciless nature. As twilight gave way to night, the battlefield lay in a somber quiet, broken only by the distant crackle of torches and the murmur of warriors preparing for the long siege yet to come. Though victorious, there was little peace to be found in the hearts of the Greeks, for such victories were fleeting, overshadowed by the ever-present specter of loss. The conflict continued, a testament to the tragic illusions of glory and the somber truths of human pride, setting the stage for the events yet untold, as both Greeks and Trojans navigated the uncertain landscape of war and its consequences. The war-worn plains of Troy lay silent under a canopy of stars, the whispers of the gods entangling in the still night air. In their celestial domain, they gathered to confer upon the mortal world below. Their concerns were voiced for one who lay fallen and dishonored, Hector, the noble prince of Troy. The gods decreed that his body should be returned to his family, for in death, every warrior deserved dignity. The divine intervention was set into motion, bringing comfort to the bereaved Trojans and reminding the Greeks of the fates that often mingled in their affairs. In a restless slumber, Achilles, the mighty Greek warrior, beheld the specter of his beloved friend Patroclus. The ethereal figure conveyed a heartfelt plea, urging Achilles to show mercy. The spirit implored that revenge had been met, and the cycle of vengeance should now give way to grace. Achilles awoke, his heart heavy with memories of friendship and loss. Patroclus's visit lingered as an echo in his mind, compelling the hero to reflect upon his actions. Across the desolate battlefield, Priam, king of Troy and father to Hector, prepared for a bold journey. Clothed in the mantle of his steadfast resolve, he journeyed under the cloak of night, stepping courageously into the camp of Achilles. With each step, he carried the weight of sorrow, yet held firm to the hope of reclaiming his son's body. In such a gesture, Priam embodied a father's enduring love, as profound as the ocean's depths against the backdrop of war's tumultuous tide. Inside the torch-lit tent of the Greek hero, the air was solemn as Priam entered, his presence humble yet dignified. Achilles, sensing the gravity of the occasion, welcomed the Trojan king, their mutual grief a bridge spanning the chasm of enmity. Priam's heart spoke, his words wrapped in vulnerability and strength, imploring Achilles to remember not only the battlefield's valiant exploits, but also the bonds of humanity. Bearing treasures as homage, Priam sought to appeal to Achilles' sense of honor. Gold glittered under the flickering torchlight, each precious item a testament to the king's desperate plea. Yet it was not the wealth, but the sincerity of Priam's sorrow-stricken heart that touched Achilles. Here stood a father stripped bare by grief, with nothing but love to shield him. Moved by this, Achilles found the grace within to respond. The dawn of understanding broke as Achilles accepted Priam's offering, agreeing to return Hector's body. In that moment, the cycle of suffering paused, allowing room for the cherished memories of Hector to take root in the hearts of those he left behind. Achilles' own humanity surged forth as he acknowledged the common thread of sorrow binding them as fathers, sons, and warriors. With a spirit of uneasy camaraderie, they shared a meal, the tentative truce fostered by mutual respect. Silence enveloped their shared space, each man engulfed by reflective thoughts. For a brief time, their enmity stood at bay, replaced by a fleeting serenity and the shared understanding that all warriors, regardless of allegiance, walked the same mortal path. This moment ushered in a truce, granting Troy time to honor their fallen prince with the rites deserved. In returning Hector, Achilles displayed the nobility that lay within even the fiercest of hearts, reminding the world of the thin line between friend and foe. As Hector's body was borne back to Troy under the solemn vault of the sky, the air was filled with the resonant cries of a city in mourning, yet firm in their resolve to endure. As the Trojans prepared for the funeral rites, a sense of reverence pervaded the atmosphere. Hector, a beloved son of Troy, would be honored with a profound dignity in death, sparking hope amidst despair. Through Priam's courage and the grace shown by Achilles, a new dawn loomed on the horizon, hinting at a potential shift in the tides of war. The chapter closes on a reflective note, inviting thoughts of how the war will evolve now that Hector's spirit rests, and how the intertwining destinies of Greeks and Trojans may yet unfold. The night of Hector's tragic death drifted into a somber dawn, casting a pale light over the city of Troy. As the first rays of sunlight kissed the city's battlements, preparations for Hector's funeral commenced. The mourning Trojans moved silently, united in their sorrow, yet determined to honor their fallen hero with the dignity he deserved. The whole city gathered to pay homage, their lamentation echoing through the walls, an outpouring of grief that mingled with the early bird calls. Amidst a sea of tear-streaked faces, King Priam stood resolute, his sorrow matched only by his determination to lead his city through this dark hour. As the final rites concluded, with Hector's body laid to rest, the Trojans found strength in their shared grief. Guided by Priam's enduring wisdom, they resolved to defend their city against the relentless Greek siege. The deep sense of loss galvanized them, transforming their sorrow into a steely determination to protect their families and their way of life. In the gathering places of Troy, words of defiance and hope were whispered, as the spirit of Hector seemed to watch over them, his courage igniting a newfound resilience among the people. Paris, swept by a tide of conflicting emotions, stepped forth. His heart burned with a desire to avenge his brother, yet he was haunted by the path his own deeds had set in motion. With steely resolve, he vowed to honor Hector by becoming the warrior his city needed, though his impulsive nature hinted at the internal struggle to focus on discipline over desire. Despite his promises, the shadow of conflict lingered in the air, threatening to unravel the resolve the Trojans had begun to weave. Meanwhile, on the Greek side, a period of uneasy peace enveloped the camp. In the aftermath of the funeral truce, the Greeks gathered to discuss their next move. The death of Hector, while a significant victory, had not brought the war closer to its conclusion. Achilles, still awash with emotions following his encounter with Priam, remained a silent presence, his wrath temporarily quelled yet his mood introspective. Leaders among the Greeks, such as Agamemnon and Odysseus, pondered new strategies, aware that the war's climax loomed ominously on the horizon. The Greeks understood that the conflict had entered a new phase, with psychological battles waged alongside those of bronze and sword. As tensions mounted, both Greek and Trojan warriors sensed the impending challenges, the air around the encampments heavy with anticipation. From the heights of Mount Olympus, divine visions were imparted to the Trojans. Prophetic dreams lingered in the minds of Priam and his people, whispers from the gods both comforting and forewarning. These signs were interpreted as symbols of hope and urgency, renewing their resolve to resist the might of their foes and to stand firm beneath the shadow of Troy's mighty walls. Day by day, the lull in fighting was marked by sporadic skirmishes, testing the will and patience of each side's champions. In these encounters, the spears flew and the shields clashed, echoing the larger war that simmered just beneath the surface. Among the warriors who lined Troy's protective walls, glances were frequently cast toward the horizon, seeking signs of movement or change, vigilant against the threat of new assaults. As these minor engagements ebbed and flowed, there lay an unspoken understanding that each was a precursor to the greater conflict lying in wait. The city of Troy itself became a fortress of both stone and spirit. Priam ensured that his people fortified their defenses, reinforcing walls that had stood against sieges and assaults for a decade. Layer upon layer of preparation was set in place, a testament to their will to endure. Banners fluttered defiantly in the breeze atop the battlements, a visual reminder of Troy's enduring strength and the unyielding courage of its defenders. Despite their grief and the looming threat, the Trojans' hearts burned with a fierce resilience. With renewed zeal and the strength drawn from shared purpose, the Trojans and their Greek adversaries braced for the continuation of their epic struggle. The gods observed from afar, their influence a constant undercurrent as mortal destinies weaved through the tapestry of time. As the sun arched high overhead, both sides knew that the war's final stages were drawing near, a culmination of years of battle, sacrifice, and pride. This spirit of anticipation swelled like a chorus through Troy, harmonizing with the hopes and fears of each defender, readying them for the trials yet to come. In the stillness of a night cloaked in mystery, the Greeks conceived a cunning stratagem to bring the Trojan War to its fateful conclusion. Odysseus, the wise and shrewd leader, orchestrated the construction of an imposing wooden horse. This grand artifact, meant to embody a supposed offering to the gods, was hollow and secretly filled with the bravest of Greek warriors. The rest of the Greek forces, following an artful plan of deception, boarded their ships and appeared to retreat, leaving the shore seemingly deserted under the veil of night. The Trojans, long beleaguered by the unending siege, emerged cautiously at dawn. Discovering the abandoned Greek camp, they were filled with a mix of relief and joyous disbelief. The immense horse stood as if a carved sentinel on the battlefield, a magnificent token left behind. Encouraged by their newfound hope, the Trojans dragged the wooden horse into their city as a victory trophy. Yet not all were convinced of its innocence. Cassandra, gifted with the power of foresight yet cursed never to be believed, urgently warned against this gift. Her desperate cries went unheeded amidst the celebratory cries of her fellow citizens. As twilight deepened and stars watched silently, the Trojan revelry filled the air with a mix of jubilation and the clattering of feasting. Within the sanctity of Troy, the horse stood silent in the square, enigmatic under the moon's gentle glow. Even as the Trojans settled into a contented slumber, the warriors concealed inside the horse stirred with relentless anticipation. Stealthily, aided by the night, they emerged, silent as shadows born of deceit. The gates of Troy, long fortified against the Greek onslaught, swung open to reveal the waiting Greek army. Chaos quickly engulfed the sleeping city as the Greek forces flooded through Troy's gates with a pent-up ferocity. A storm of clashing swords and frantic cries resonated within the once thriving streets. The proud Trojan defenses crumbled in the weight of sudden betrayal, and the city, inescapable under the night sky, faced its darkest hour. King Priam, the noble ruler of this legendary city, met his tragic end at the hands of the invaders, marking the extinguishing of Troy's royal lineage and a hero's heart. Within this storm, a flicker of hope emerged through Aeneas, the valiant Trojan prince chosen by fate. Guided by the divine, he gathered remnants of his family and loyal followers, maneuvering through the infernal destruction with a newfound resolve. Tugged by destiny's unseen hand, Aeneas embarked on a journey that would see him flee from the burning embers of his past to establish a newfound legacy in the land destined to become Rome. As dawn breached the horizon, a different silence settled over Troy's smoldering ruins. The Greeks, achieving what had seemed unattainable through a decade of relentless struggle, stood victorious yet weighed down by their cost. The breath of the morning wind carried with it the mournful echoes of loss, as fallen comrades were remembered. The Pyrrhic victory, although complete, bore with it a bitter aftertaste, a testamental reminder of glory's fleeting nature amidst the enduring echoes of mortality. And thus, the great city of Troy fell, its majestic walls and stories scattered like ashes in the river of time. In this final turn, the tale of the Trojan War unfolded into reflection. Threads of pride, fate, and valor wove together a tapestry etched into the hearts of those who witnessed the twilight of legends. As the last embers cooled beneath the dawning sun, what remained was a quiet acknowledgement of life's impermanence and a gentle invitation for the mind to find rest in the silence that followed.